what this led me to was there was other stuff on Mars I wanted to get into because the face in Cydonia is really fascinating, but there's all kinds of stuff everywhere else. What happened was, over the years, there was people who began to think that they saw pictograms on Mars, what they call pictograms, which is this stuff like this. For instance, they thought that this is a dolphin. It's supposed to be a dolphin. That's called a dolphin. So this is a natural formation, I think, that looks maybe a little bit like a dolphin. So they begin to see things like that on the left, thinking it was a roadrunner. There's a guy named George J. Haas, really nice guy. I'm going to do a show in a couple weeks, who's convinced that all this stuff is equivalent to the information, the pictograms on the plains of Nazca. Here's a seahorse. You know, it's like your ram. It's possible that there was some intent in there, but oh yeah, this is something else that ended up. There was a first image of the face on Mars that NASA sent. Somebody wrote on it, and there were actually the same people who believed in these pictograms were convinced that somebody had written on the D&M pyramid on Mars. If you look at the words, I think they're on the left. I think it says Barsoom, which was Edgar Rice Burroughs' name for Mars, the planet Mars. And I think that some of the other words I think are in there. I believe I can see Hoagland, who was one of the guys that was the biggest critic. I think it says Hoagland is a fag. So what? And these guys were actually convinced that this was actually written on the D&M. Okay, and I'm like, no, what's happening is that the guys at JPL are doing this deliberately to basically say we can do whatever we want with these images and you can't stop us. That's what I think was going on. But, you know, they think that this is a face. This is like, they think it's a crown face. This guy has a dude with a crown. Kind of looks pretty good, except when you look at the context of it. And it's just a pattern of rock that kind of goes there. And what they've done is they've shaded this stuff because they think that they might be seeing something here. Now, I could buy all this. Here's Nefertiti on Mars, maybe. I could buy all this stuff, except that yeah, this is a profile face. Except the problem is that they like to make the equivalents to Nazca. But if you go to Nazca and you start looking at all the lines, you see all the patterns, you see all the runways, obviously what they are. You see the pictograms, you know, you see the sheared off mountaintops. You can clearly see that these things are intended to be, there's the spaceman, I like him, he's really cute, waving to us, saying, hey, come land here. Here's the spider. Actually, the spider is representative of the constellation of Orion and the star Sirius. If you overlay them, what you will see is that they do overlay in a mirrored configuration. In other words, they're looking up at the sky and they are drawing what they're seeing, as above, so below. Now, again, all the stuff at Nazca is accepted. It is believed. There's people that think that the face on Mars might be half human, half lion. This is some work that Hoagland did, where he took the right half and the left half. And the one on the left looks like a humanoid, you know, primitive hominid maybe. The one on the right, lion? Does it look like a lion? I admit it does. It persisted in other data sets as we went through it. I've even done stuff where I've looked at the European Space Agency and done some symmetries. And when I do it, you notice all that weird geometric stuff above the face there? Now that I look at it from here, it almost looks like Genghis Khan or something. And no, I'm not kidding. And you know, you look at this and you see these geometric patterns, and it could be just data dropouts and stuff, but it seems to have a pattern, and it seems to actually come up on the face. And if you highlight them, they look like some sort of ceremonial headpiece. And the question is, was this always intended to be a two-sided thing? And did they want us to flip this over and see this stuff and get this idea that this is really something special? And also keeping in mind that this camera can see this stuff, but other cameras don't seem to pick it up. But then, you know, we've got 4, 5, 6 different instruments there, so it shows up on some, but not on others. And the question is the data being tampered with, or is it just different equipment is showing us different aspects of this place on Mars? This is the one that really weirded me out, though. When I did the lion side and did some symmetry, I started looking, and I saw this guy right there. And, you know, he looks like, I don't know, Ming the Merciless, maybe? See that guy with the Fu Manchu mustache there? This is the face on Mars. Well, if you see that, okay. See the little Fu Manchu mustache right there? And the bald hat, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, Ming the Merciless on Mars. So you can definitely, it's not that you're tricking your mind, you're seeing things that are there, but the question is, do they mean something? Are they really significant or not? And where I had a problem, well, here's my favorite example. Mars. What the hell is that? You guys see that? That kitty cat standing there and that playing air guitar? Somebody sent me this. A guy named Malcolm Scott sent me this. He slid it under my door. And again, it looks better on the web, and I've got the printout, and I got the printout on my wall. He slid this thing under my door at the Conscious Life Expo. I was like, he goes, "You want to work with me?" I'm like, "Maybe." I mean, but seriously, what WTF? What is that? I don't know what that is. But there's an alcove, and again, if there's an alcove, he's got eyes, he's got kitty ears. It looks like a kitty standing up. And it's really there. But the thing about this is that it might be a statue, but as I looked at the rest of that image, there is nothing else in this image. And this is a MRO image. It's beautiful. It's this big, long thing. There's nothing else for like 20 miles around that looks remotely artificial. So my conclusion is it's probably not what we think we're seeing, but it could be. I mean, it looks like a kitty cat, right? I'm going to name him something. So as part of this, where I disagreed with these guys was that I could buy that there was some sort of pictogram stuff on Mars if it was all in the same place like Nazca. The key thing with Nazca is it's all on the same plane. There's no question that it's all related. But these guys are finding stuff here and finding stuff there, and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of interesting, but it's only, how much time do I have? This, okay, because we're getting to the really good stuff. 35, great. So one of the ones that George sent me, and again, with all great respect to George, he's written some really good books, and I don't mean to disparage him, but I just don't agree with them. Basically, he sent me this thing, which is what they think is a parrot on Mars. Okay, and here's his illustration of it. And it's like, okay, that's possible, and it's on a very, very large image strip. And what interested me was not the parrot. What got me interested was actually this right here. As I begin to look at the parrot, what I felt like it was a lot of natural erosion. But what was up there at the top is this. And again, I begin to work with the image. I'd known about this before. Whoops, not what I wanted to do. So what I noticed was parallel line, parallel line, parallel line, parallel line, parallel line, 6 or 7 parallel lines coming from this parrot area to this thing. And when I see that, I see roads. And I'm sorry about this screen. It's really not projecting. But you notice some other things. Notice this right here. Come on, give me my cursor. Notice this right here, this pattern, right? Reservoirs or something, very dark. And then there's this dark, and I look at this and I'm like, this looks like a pier. This looks like a pier that goes out into some, this dark stuff could have at one time, there could have been water there. What if this was like lakefront property on Mars? And I began to go, it kind of looks like lakefront property on Mars. And then I thought, well, what happens if I just darken in the area where I think the water was? And then it really begins to look like that's water, and this is dry land, and this thing is a little town sitting up on top. And then I compared it to where I used to live, which is Redondo Beach, Hermosa Beach. And you got, this is closer up, but you've got Marina Del Rey. You got a pier here. You got a pier here. You got this kind of, jutting out, the breaker there. There's a breaker in Redondo. Yeah, I think I used to live like right there, actually. This is Hermosa, Manhattan. And notice all this wavy stuff here. And again, I've darkened this, but notice this wavy stuff. That's just because there was water there, and it was flowing over this. And maybe it was a river rather than a lake. But if it looks exactly the same, it probably is exactly the same as my philosophy. So around this area, I begin to look. This is just this really weird thing that I found sticking up out of the ground. It's a couple hundred feet high. And sorry, we do have too much contrast. But again, notice the 4 blocks. The square stuff. If you could walk right up to this thing. It looks like a toppled over building, a part of a building that fell over. And again, there's this rectilinear pattern that kind of catches my eye, and that's near this area. This is a close-up of the parrot. The parrot looks to me like naturally eroded wind. This is wind erosion. This is what happens when you have wind. And there's not a lot of wind on Mars anymore because Mars, the atmospheric pressure is so low that a 200-mile-an-hour hurricane would feel like a 5-mile-an-hour breeze. So it takes a long time to, but this is why I don't think that this thing really was a parrot. But because that's what you get, is you get this swirling rounded stuff like this. You do not get sharp angle. That's why none of the pyramidal shapes could possibly be created by wind, because they would be round. They would not be squared off like we see them. So, you know, I started looking at this and I thought, look, I'm going to break this up and I'm going to start looking at each one of these individual segments and see what I can see. And I started with the right-hand side there where the piers were. And as I got into it, I began to look and notice that this looks like this one of the collapsed pier area looks like to me like give me my cursor. Maybe I'll just give in and wear my glasses. How does that sound? It's terrible what age does to you. So this looked like, come on, like it might be a pier that came out and then maybe it collapsed down, or that was anchored at the bottom. See how that's kind of square there? There's kind of a square shape there. And then I noticed these cross beams here, and I thought, well, people could actually walk from there. And these are block sized. They're like houses. It's like a little housing community. And you could like take this road, go up over this bridge, and notice that there's some stuff underneath that bridge that looks like it's support. And as you get closer to it, you can see, you know, bridge over there, bridge over there. You just take a nice stroll out to the pier, walk out here, and then fall off the edge. And I'm just like really weirded out by this stuff. It looks really cool. Now down below that is this area right here, which that's about the size of a 2-story hotel. Notice it's got, you know, kind of a little first story, second story. Here's the parking lot. Here's again some support structure going vertical. It looks like these little blocks. These little blocks are all the size of, you know, houses. That's pretty blurry. We're just going to give up on that one. That's a close-up of it. But then I started looking to the next area. And again, I see city blocks. I see that this area here is about the size of a city block right there. So again, there's roads. I'm just going to kind of let you look at this and take a look at this thing here. You guys see these squares there? There's tubes coming down out of it. There's tubes coming over here. See the star right here? Anybody see that? There's tubes coming over here. There's, I don't know, I call them solar panels, some sort of panel pattern thing there. Here's the archways. Here's the entrance where the people come in. You could literally drive your truck right up, park it, and probably go into the entrance right here. And even this looks like some kind of bunker or hangar. And again, notice the access roads all around it. And then down below here, there's these. See that? Looks like vents or something. And then down here is what I call the loading dock. Flat platform goes underneath. Here's a shadow. Here's the exposed sunshine. Here's the side to support it. Here's the side support for it. And I called this the processing plant. And this is the vent area, or the exhaust system. And that's the loading dock. Whoops, let's go back. And here's a close-up of the processing plant. Now again, it's blurry. Why is it blurry? Because this is the best you can do with the data that they give you.
Wouldn't you love to go explore that?
Oh, yeah, except that, you know, I mean, it kind of reminds me of Boeing, where I used to work, so I don't really want to go back there. But to give you an idea of, again, here's a close-up of this area. So let's say you're going to work here, and you got to work in the exhaust thing. So you're going to come, and you're going to walk, and you're going to kind of go down these stairs right here. And there's a platform right there. You can subtly see that supports. And then look at this. This is like a platform that you could walk out on top. Below are these exhaust vents. Here's the loading dock. And there's like a bunch of debris and junk and garbage. There's really interesting stuff over here too, but it's all just stuff that I see. Sloping hillside. I see access ramps or stairs. There's a terrace on top. There's the vents. There's the loading dock. Can you guys see this stuff? It just, I mean, I saw this and it just like blew me away because it looks completely like an industrial area here on Earth. Next to it is this. This is, I like to call this the office park because if you look, you can see that this is built into the hillside. But again, notice that there's like dark areas here, and there's all these vertical supports, right? Like as if there were offices or something in there, and there's windows. And to give you an example, this is the Weyerhaeuser building in Washington State. And again, notice the pillars here in between. Pillars, 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 some pillars. Dark areas where the offices are. It's like it's just built into the side, and this is right next to this processing plant. Above here, there's some more stuff that looks patterned. Here's the housing complex. These are like single-family homes. They're about the size of a 3,000 or 4,000 square foot home. This, to give you an idea of the scale, this is what a 18-wheeler semi-track, that's a semi-truck, tractor, trailer, 18-wheeler that I stuck in there. That's the same size. So you literally could drive up, park your car, go have lunch with the wife, go back to work at the processing plant. And then it got really weird because I started to look in the area around there, and I began to see other stuff like these. And I want to see what this looks like. Looks pretty good. I think that's okay. Maybe it's just my angle that makes me think it doesn't look as good as it could. But as I started to look at this, I began to see that there was other things there. So at the top area here, there's this thing, which is sticking up out of the ground. Again, there's an access road that leads right up here. There's a base with this pattern in it, as if you could go in there. There's a sort of I don't know, some sort of support structure there. But this looks like some kind of big antenna or something sticking up. It's sticking up vertical on the surface. This really freaked me out because it reminded me of the LAX, the restaurant at the LAX airport. You ever been there? It's got, arch. Come on, mouse. So you got a disc-shaped platform here. You've got an arch there, an arch there, an arch there. There's probably an arch on the other side. There's a little dome there. There's these dark areas where you're going to go underneath. It's sitting on top of a sort of a dark tube there, like a tank or something. Here's another disc-shaped platform. And it even looks like there might have been some blocks or something that used to be there that kind of fell off the front of this. But these, yeah, the black dots I'm not so sure about, but I do think that this structure is definitely, bizarre. I just decided to really darken the area around this kind of antenna thing. And I don't know what it is, but it's sticking up. It's about, I'm going to say, it's probably about 10 stories high, the very tip of this thing. And, again, you can see that at the base, there's places you could go enter this structure and go in and do whatever you would do there. Here's the LAX Hilton in close-up, or the LAX restaurant in close-up. To me, you can't argue with that. As blurry as it is, it's inarguable that it's artificial. It might be called Encounters. Yeah, the Encounters bar. Here's the LAX restaurant and the other guy on Mars. If it's on Earth and on Mars, it's probably the same thing. Now, here's another area there that I like to call the reservoir area. So I don't know what these dark things are. This is cool. This is a racetrack. Maybe they race horses there. But these dark areas are all dried up, but they're sectioned out. They're regular repeating patterns. They're not geology. And then what really got me kind of really interested was, see up here, look at this. Doesn't this look a little bit maybe like a school bus is kind of what I thought it looked like? Like 2 layers. I don't know what it is, but it's got a tube coming out of it. It leads down to here, to this thing, which is a platform. And on the platform is this tall structure. See how it comes down like that? I don't know what this is, but I suspect that this is like a drill of some kind. And what would happen is the platform would slide underneath the hill here. As an example, they would drill out whatever they were drilling, come back. It would get pumped up from this platform, up this tube, into this little truck here, which would then take it over to the processing plant, and they would process the ore. And this is all, it looks like some sort of operation that was going on to actually work and mining something in this area. And, you'd have storage pools. Maybe if you were working with radioactive material, you'd want storage pools. But then right above it, it gets even weirder because I noticed that here's a close-up of this. But again, this is a single object. It comes down. It's got this. It's like a train or some weird thing. But above it here, there's the thing I was calling a school bus. But next to it, above it, whoops, right here is this thing, the potato bug. And it has, again, this weird dark pattern on it, which is completely unnatural. It has tubes coming out of it right there with a support right there. And these tubes connect to this tube, which goes all along here. There's cross supports or cross tubes. It's a pipeline. And there's even, if you notice, there's a dark area here where it's like a pipeline, and it comes right down into the back end of this thing. So this is some kind of artificial structure. It's some kind of pumping mechanism. It's some kind of artificial system. I can't speculate what it is doing there. All I can tell you is that those are pipes. They're connecting at right angles to each other. They're connecting to this big potato bug thing, and it's doing something, and right next to it is what looks like to me like a truck or something that could be taking the material. So I have no idea what they were doing or who was doing this. But it's on a very massive scale, and it's all there in this one area, this Parrot City area. So this looks pretty fresh. You know, this does not look very old. So the question is this area something that used to be one of our bases? You know, there's rumors that we had bases on Mars. So, I can't tell you, but aging it, I don't know. The problem with aging anything or dating anything on other planets is it's all based on crater counts. And because there's a late heavy bombardment, heavy cratering and all that stuff. But if planets were exploding in the solar system, then all the crater counts are worthless because all those are fresh craters. So they're not from 4 billion years ago. So, I can't tell you how old they are, this stuff is. No. So anyway, then I decided to look for any more images of this area I could find. And it turned out there was one more. And it really changed the way I looked at this. This is, again, the area that they thought was a parrot. And I just wanted to say I'm really grateful for the guys that look for these pictogram things, because it led me to look at this other area, this Parrot City area. But up here is the city. And this time, instead of being in the light, it's in shadow. And as I begin to look at that and play with it, I noticed something really strange. Anybody notice anything just off the top of your head that's different? Well, first of all, it looks really destroyed. But here's what really bothered me. See this white stuff here? See, it's vertical? And there's striations in it, right? And I begin to realize, hey, this is the stuff I thought was a pier. But it's actually not on the same level as the city. It's below that. This is a 600-foot tall vertical retaining wall. Here's where the industrial complex would be. Here's the area where like I talked about, what I call the hotel. These are just nicknames, and this was this is where the pumping station was, right here. So it's at a slightly different scale, but there's this vertical retaining wall. And again, you can see that this is all eroded, it's damaged. There's all kinds of stuff dropping off. Notice that this is that first thing I thought was a pier, but it actually looks like it's just a road or a lower part of this that just kind of runs right along there. And if you jumped off the edge, you would have a really long drop. But how come you didn't see that in this image? This is the same area from the original NASA images. Notice it's all black, okay? White, black. White and black. Also, it's vertical here. It's all flat and stretched out in this image. Okay, so this part, come on, cursor. This guy right here, it looks like it's all flat. And in this image, it's that same area is vertical, straight up and down. So here's what they did. They took an image of this, which was actually better than this one, actually a better resolution. They took an image like this, and they stretched it. They pulled it like this. They say it's for map correction, what they like to call map-corrected images. In other words, we're going to fix this so it's as if you were looking straight down on it. But as we saw with the face on Mars, what did that do to the face, right? Pulled the eyes down like that and made it look really funky. So when you take this image and you push it back, squish it back the way it's supposed to be, guess what? All that stuff then becomes vertical, and you get the same sense. Only, why is it black? How can it be black? This is the original version image I showed you, but I just compressed it in. how can it be black when this is clearly in the light of day and here it's in shadow? How can this be brighter than this, the same thing? How can it be so much brighter in the shadowed image than it is in the full daylight image? Anybody know? Because NASA took an airbrush to this one and airbrushed it out because they didn't want you to see that what these really were was retaining walls, which are artificial. I mean, there's no way that that is any kind of natural vertical structure. The grooves are in there. That's a design element. The grooves are there. Let's go back to it. Why would you do grooves like that? Because let's assume this is concrete. If you put the grooves in like this, guess what? That stiffens it and makes it stronger. That's why you do that in structural design. So what they had done is they had blacked this out and they stretched it so that you really wouldn't be able to tell what it was. Here they are side by side, the two images. Okay, am I crazy or does that look like walls to you guys? Okay, anybody not think that? Because I would like to hear from you. You don't think so?
I don't know if you know who Ray Kurzweil is.
I'm going to humiliate you, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know if you know who Ray Kurzweil is.
I've heard the name.
His book is about the brain. And our brains are incredibly pattern-making or pattern-matching mechanisms. So a lot of the stuff that you're showing, yes, it looks like a lot of patterns, but that's what our brains do. That's the brain's primary focus. So
Yeah.
I think I'm agreeing. I'm not disagreeing with you, but what I'm saying is I would like to see high resolution images and not some of these really blurry stuff.
Yeah.
Because our brain is made to make patterns where patterns don't exist.
Okay, well, I hear you, and that's not true, but okay. I know that there's what the skeptics like to call pareidoia, right? Which they claim that's what the face on Mars is. It's not that there's an eyeball. It's not that there's actually real measurable stuff there. It's all in our heads, right? Now, that doesn't,
in our brain, right?
but that doesn't exist. That there's no such condition. Pareidoia is a fake word that was made up by a guy who wrote an article for Skeptical Inquirer in 1994. So it doesn't. I'm just telling you, it doesn't exist. Okay. There is a condition, however, called prosospagnosia, which is the inability to recognize faces. And about 2% of the population has that. There are 700 medical papers on that condition. There's none on pareidoia. There's 4 that use the word in the abstract, but there's actually no such medical condition. It's never been documented. Nobody can tell you what part of the brain does it because it doesn't exist. However, they can tell you what part of the brain creates this inability to recognize faces. And unfortunately, to 2% of the population that has that condition, 90% of them work at NASA, so it's really a problem. I hear you. I don't agree with you. I don't agree. I wrote an article on my blog called "There's No Such Thing as Pareidoia," kind of explaining it. It's
Well, I didn't agree with it either.
right. I'm just saying that
Read this latest research on
that's great. That's great. I'm not interested. If that's true, then you can't trust anything you see with your eyes, right? Oh, my girlfriend's not really beautiful. Oh, yeah, she is, actually. She is. Other people will say that. So how much time have I got left? 15 minutes. Awesome. Okay, there's a 10-minute sign. I would know. So as part of this, the pictogram guys started digging into other things. There's another thing I want to show you. There's this thing. And what I call this in the book is the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus. There's an Egyptian cartouche that's the Eye of Ra, or the Eye of Horus. There also seems to be one on Mars. This guy found this image. And again, I was kind of reluctant about this because of the fact that it's isolated by itself. There's not really anything else around it that looks really weird. But as I started to dig into this thing, I began to notice again that it's got this pattern that is... Now, see, I might buy into that with the pictogram people because some guy looked at this and he said, oh, that looks like some kind of parrot to me or a bird. That's what they think it looks like. And again, I think it's invaluable because if they weren't looking for these patterns, we would not have found this thing. But to me, what makes this Eye of Ra thing extraordinary is the fact that it looks like this. Now, a guy named Steve Meads wrote a really great book called Chauvet Dreams. There's a cave in France, Chauvet, France, C-H-A-U-V-E-T. How do I say that? Anybody French? Chauvet. And in that cave, there is the image on the left, which is the same image literally virtually as the Eye of Ra or the Eye of Horus from ancient Egypt. Those cave paintings are 30,000 years old. 30,000 years. So this same image has been with us for 30,000 years. And it's repeated itself apparently over and over again. So Steve looked at this and he said, you know, this looks like the Chauvet cave art. It looks like the Eye of Ra. It looks like David Wilcock has made this connection. Sorry about the guts here. But the pineal gland is what he thinks that it represents. There's people that have said that. I think other people besides Dave. Whitley Strieber says it's where we got our symbol for RX. You know, the RX symbol for our prescriptions, like all the cures are through this. So there's all kinds of, you know, historical comparisons for this stuff. But then I look at this and it kind of does look like it. And then as I begin to study the image in more detail, which again you can see is you can see this pattern of rectangular structure and stuff around it. And again, not aligned with the images, but actually, you know, 90 degrees to this object at all times. There's this area right here, which has, again, tubes and girders running cross to each other on top. This is around the eye. And I really like this area here because this is the entrance. Sorry, this is a close-up of this other stuff. See the pattern there, again. All this stuff, this is all structural. Look at that right there. See that? That's all structural. If I was an engineer and I wanted to create some supporting lattice, that's what I would design. Do exactly that. And again, one of the reasons I recognize this is because I've done this kind of work. So, you know, I mean, this makes sense from a structural standpoint to me if you were going to build something. And it's eroded. Well, so what you've got is you've got the skin of this thing is eroded away, and this is what's underneath. This is the support girders and stuff. And at the base is the entrance. Like if you were to walk up to this thing, here's, you know, again, here's the entrance. There's two edges here, these like sort of forked things that come down. You would walk right in. And there's even stuff up here. There's another star. These are just things that are ruined and hanging over. And, you know, it looks like some kind of, I don't know, temple or something that somebody would have gone into and done their business. So the last bit is the Martian junkyard. I want to get to this before we go. This is the stuff from the rovers, because as you look at the rovers, you see all kinds of really interesting things. But it starts with this. These are what Arthur C. Clarke called banyan trees on Mars. This was an image that was taken by Mars Global Surveyor, and right away it created a lot of controversy. People were saying, yeah, it looks like trees. And as you get closer, they do kind of look like trees. They definitely have some three-dimensional aspect to them. But what NASA says they are is geysers. They say that they are some dark, and they don't know why it's dark, but carbon dioxide that's been spewing up and spreads out on the surface of Mars and creates this pattern. Well, if that were true, then, oh, you can't even read that, can you? Even Wikipedia says that they don't know what they are. Thank you. Even Wikipedia says they don't know what they are. What they are is a matter of debate. But here's what I did. I took the bushes from Mars at the top, and I compared them with real banyan trees from Wayne Newton's estate in Las Vegas. Those are Wayne Newton's banyan trees. These are the objects on Mars, right? And there they are side by side. So really, do they not? NASA's saying these are flat, two-dimensional patterns on the surface. Does that look two-dimensional to you, this guy right here? Whoops.
Two-dimensional doesn't have shadows.
No, it doesn't create shadows. This is Wayne Newton. This is Mars. Vegas, Mars, Vegas, Mars, Vegas, Mars. There's other stuff. There's these weird things. You get really interesting stuff if you take NASA's images and flip them upside down. You get really, really interesting stuff. They said these are dark streaks that are rolling down a hill, right? But if you look at them, you can see that they actually look more like palm trees that are sticking up out of the ground. And in fact, again, let's look at shadows. See how the light has come through right here? So you could walk underneath these roots or whatever the hell these things are, and there's a little light passing through right there, which is exactly correct with the lighting geometry of the image. There's a close-up. These are like some kind of trees sticking up. Now, the rovers started taking, images of Mars. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. We had the first rovers were Pathfinder, we had Spirit and Opportunity, and now we have Curiosity, which is really, next we're just going to send a Sherman tank there next time. So we're getting bigger and bigger, which is really cool. And all you have to do is look at pictures this is one from Spirit, and it's a rock, supposedly, with a completely flat sheared-off face with a rectangular hole in it and a pattern of bolts around the front. And you know what they did? They took a couple pictures of this. Notice how shiny and metallic it is? That's because it's made of metal. It's not a rock. What NASA did was really funny is when they went to finally leave the area of the landing, they drove right up to this thing, and then the images stopped. They made a little movie where it comes right up, they turn to look, and then they just keep going. Now, wouldn't you at least think if you had a rock with a rectangular hole in that you might drive up to it and stick the camera in there and see what was inside? I mean, I would be curious. They apparently weren't. Here's some more images of just the same rock. And as you go around Mars, you start to see more and more cubical rocks. You see things that have weird patterns on them that look like sheet metal cased objects. I'm going to go through these really quick. Here's some more buried stuff. Sort of ceramic, circular. Here's some kind of mechanism buried, partially buried on the planet. Here's that other guy with just, again, this is a square box. And remember, this stuff is filled with silt and dirt. Here's one that I really like. Looks like a machine fitting to me. It's got a series of openings. It's got stiffening ribs. It's got everything you would want for an airplane part. Here's a little box on Mars. I'm going to whip through this stuff. These are a couple examples of what NASA calls blueberries on the right, and actually primitive fossils from Earth of plants. They're very similar. We'll go through this. Here's a crinoid fossil on the right of a plant from the Cambrian era. Here's a crinoid fossil from Mars on the left. But they say it's not a crinoid fossil. It's not. It just looks exactly like one, but it's really not. That's really what the argument is. Here's a dinosaur or a bird head. See that right there? Kind of looks like some early primitive dinosaur fossils that we have today. Here's the skull on Mars. Anybody seen this? Joseph Skipper was the guy who found this. Here is the skull on Mars. Looks like, I don't know, a cross between Predator and a Stormtrooper. He's got 2 eyes. He's got a nose. Protuberance. These are big, beefy things for his jaws. There's his eye sockets. There's the nasal cavity. And when I enhanced it, what I saw was he had these deep grooves in his skull. And, you know, if you had bone structure like that hanging down like this, you would need really powerful muscles to be anchored into your skull. So, again, all this anatomically, I'm not an anatomist, but anatomically it all makes sense for this to really have been a skull of some creature that used to walk the Earth. This, we're not going to have time. How much have I got?
About 5 minutes.
About 5. Okay, that's my 5-minute sign. Remember the figurine on Mars? You remember this little guy? This was something that came out back about 3 or 4 years ago. And it looked like a little mermaid or something on the planet Mars. And everybody laughed and said, oh, it couldn't possibly be what it is. But if you look at it, you can see that it's got an arm and a head and a body, and it looks like she's on her knees. And this could even be some kind of platform she's sitting on. And the biggest reason why it couldn't possibly be a real figurine on Mars was because it was only 2 inches tall. Well, there's a statue of one of the pharaohs from ancient Egypt that is 2 inches tall. So tell me that that's not what it is, or that it can't possibly be a figurine. It's very similar to this other figurine from the harbor in Copenhagen. Similar kind of pose, similar kind of thing. I'm just putting it out there that there's no reason to dismiss this stuff because we're seeing so much of this stuff on Mars. Here is an object, probably an air conditioner from Mars. This is about the size of one of these window air conditioners. And again, as a mechanical guy, a mechanical engineer, this is the case. There's some sort of venting and stuff in here. This is just like a honeycomb metal cased object. And this is right near this figurine. Here's another metallic thing, sheet metal piece. You know, rocks do not erode like this. They do not erode with a big thin layer like that. Metal does. Metal bends like this. Metal's reflective like that. There's a bunch of other stuff around the figurine. This one I really like because it kind of looks like a spider or something. It's got a central hole and these things. And they also, again, wallpapered over it. They put something over the top of that so you couldn't see it in close-up. Here's, again, a box with some kind of venting in it, a mechanical box. There's the spider thing. And if you can just right here, see this square area right there? That's NASA just papered over that to cover up what was there. Here's a wrench on Mars. I don't think it's a lizard. I think it's some kind of wrench. This is a sheet metal part. This is thin sheet metal. Rocks do not erode like that. That looks like some sort of clipper or clamp thing. Here's a gearbox on Mars. Little spiky things in a pattern. Here's a cowbell on Mars. More cowbell. I got to go. This is all around the figurine. It was discovered near this area called Home Plate, which some people think is a non-natural formation. Again, I want to show these to you real quick. This is, I think, eroded. It looks like eroded computer equipment because as I look at this stuff, I can see, again, what you do with mechanical stuff is you put it inside boxes, metal boxes. So you have thin sheet metal cases like this and this. And you notice these really weird things that I'm going to talk about in just in a second. They're all inside of these sheet metal cased areas. They're all inside there. In other words, this stuff isn't outside here. So I think these are actually like equipment, computer equipment guts. Here's a little bit of a close-up of it. Again, there's a little metal fitting right there. I like this guy here, right there, because I think that might be like a projector. But again, this is a sheet metal case that's eroded. Rocks don't erode like that. That's some kind of metal fitting. There's a clamp there. Notice how it reflects. See that? I think that is a partially buried projector. Imagine if this eroded away and had a bunch of dirt in it. Same kind of thing. There's the lens. It's probably not a projector, but whatever it is, it's something similar. Somebody left their Hasselblad camera on Mars. Hoagie found that one. I like that one. Who lost their Hasselblad on Mars? Here's vertically looking down at this stuff. This is the projector. This is the object next to it. You see these little things? That's tracks. The stuff on the right is rover tracks. Here's that little metal fitting I talked about. I think that like this is if you put there's a little bar in there, you probably could flip that thing up. I don't know what it is. It's some sort of metal fitting. Here's another piece. I want you to look at this guy really close because see this here? Yeah, here and here. Those are, again, that's a rounded kind of attachment fitting. This is the edge of what used to be the casing. Here's the guts, the probably electronic guts. There's, again, the two pins where you would stick stuff through. Here's a close-up of the guts from above. And it looks like, you ever look at your computer, you know, your video card or something? You stick it in there and it's got connectors at the back. So these would be like electrical connectors. These, and again, it's layers. It's one on top of the other. Rocks don't erode that way. They don't erode like this. And this stuff is only inside of this cased area here. It's about like that big. It's about the size. It's about like this. Like it would be like a little computer box. There's probably something. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm not gonna leave you without this. I'm sorry. I got caught up in the stuff at the beginning. Curiosity landed. Took some pictures. The first picture it took was the area around it. Look at this. Notice this right here. Looks like this. That is a bent step pyramid. There's the entrance. There's the second level. There's a little maybe satellite pyramid right there. It looks exactly like this guy in Egypt or very similar to it. And the cool thing about this is that as they drove around and got closer to this, where they could have taken better pictures, the other pictures are all worse than the original picture. Some more stuff on Mars real quick. I don't know what this is, too. I wanted to show you one more eroded stuff. I could not no, that's a phaser, I think. You know, Captain Kirk left his phaser, his broken phaser on Mars. Here's a turbocharger or a piston head on Mars. Again, thanks to my friend Kimberly Reck. Here's a flex shaft coupler on Mars. But I wanted to get to this. This is the last thing. I call this the tank, even though it's about this big. It's about the size of a suitcase or a carry-on. Notice that this guy here looks to me, I worked in aviation, this looks like a jet engine casing. And it has a lot of patterns on it, like it's a cylindrical object. This guy here, notice this spokey, clocky kind of pattern there. This is an old, eroded, shipwrecked piece. And there's a little tube coming out the front of it. So as you look at Mars, what you see that there is stuff all over the place that doesn't belong. At the far away Nazca, here's a seahorse. You know, it's like your ram. It's possible that there was some intent in there, but oh yeah, this is something else that ended up. There was a first image of the face on Mars that NASA sent. somebody wrote on it. And there were actually the same people who believed in these pictograms were convinced that somebody had written on the D&M pyramid on Mars. If you look at the words, I think they're on the left. I think it says Barsoom, which was Edgar Rice Burroughs' name for Mars, the planet Mars. And I think that some of the other words I think are in there. I believe I can see Hoagland, who was one of the guys that was the biggest critic. I think it says Hoagland is a fag. So what? And these guys were actually convinced that this was actually written on the D&M. Okay, and I'm like, no, what's happening is that the guys at JPL came back. But what this led me to was there was other stuff on Mars I wanted to get into, because the face in Cydonia is really fascinating, but there's all kinds of stuff everywhere else. What happened was, over the years, there was people who began to think that they saw pictograms on Mars, what they call pictograms, which is this stuff like this. For instance, they thought that this is a dolphin. It's supposed to be a dolphin. That's called the dolphin. So this is a natural formation, I think, that looks maybe a little bit like a dolphin. So they begin to see things like that on the left, thinking it was a roadrunner. There's a guy named George J. Haas, really nice guy. I'm going to do a show in a couple weeks, who's convinced that all this stuff is equivalent to the information, the pictograms on the planes. Lion? Does it look like a lion? I admit it does. It persisted in other data sets as we went through it. I've even done stuff where I've looked at the European Space Agency and done some symmetries. And when I do it, you notice all that weird geometric stuff above the face there? Now I look at it from here, it almost looks like Genghis Khan or something. And no, I'm not kidding. And you look at this and you see these geometric patterns, and it could be just data dropouts and stuff, but it seems to have a pattern, and it seems to actually come up on the face. And if you highlight them, they look like some sort of ceremonial headpiece. And the question is, was this always intended to be a two-sided thing? And did they want us to flip this over and see this stuff and get this idea that this is really something special? And also keeping in mind that this camera can see this stuff, but other cameras, you see the sheared off mountaintops. You can clearly see that these things are intended to be. There's the spaceman. I like him. He's really cute, waving to us, saying, "Hey, come land here." Here's the spider. Actually, the spider is representative of the constellation of Orion and star Sirius. If you overlay them, what you will see is that they do overlay in a mirrored configuration. In other words, they're looking up at the sky and they are drawing what they're seeing, as above, so below. Now, again, all this stuff at NASA is accepted. It is believed. There's people that think that the face on Mars might be half human, half lion. This is some work that Hoagland did, where he took the right half and the left half. And the one on the left looks like a humanoid, primitive hominid maybe. The one on the right are doing this deliberately to basically say we can do whatever we want with these images and you can't stop us. That's what I think was going on. But, they think that this is a face. This is like, they think it's a crown face. This guy is a dude with a crown. Kind of looks pretty good, except when you look at the context of it. And it's just a pattern of rock that kind of goes there. And what they've done is they've shaded this stuff because they think that they might be seeing something here. Now, I could buy all this. Here's Nefertiti on Mars, maybe. I could buy all this stuff, except that this is a profile face. Except the problem is that they like to make the equivalents to Nazca. But if you go to Nazca and you start looking at all the lines, you see all the patterns, you see all the runways, obviously what they are. You see the picture